And good morning, friends. Welcome to The Bright Side. I am Pharmacist Ben. Thanks for joining us. 844-236-6010 is our number, as always, on The Bright Side. We love hearing from you. If you have questions, comments, or success stories you'd like to share, if you have if you or a loved one needs help with a health challenge, we're here for you. 844-236-6010. We'll get your calls in our next segment. We're going to talk to Jenny Black at the bottom of the hour. We're going to talk about how to stay sane in a digital world. Jenny is the author. Her website is mediatrauma.com, and she's the author of a book called "Staying Sane in a Media-Driven World." We'll talk to Jenny at the bottom of the hour. I must admit, I am addicted to my iPhone. I love my iPhone. We'll talk to Jenny about that. I love data. I'm an information junkie, and my iPhone and my computer, in addition to being a source of trauma, media trauma, are also a source of great information. So it's hard to kind of figure out where you draw the line between being addicted to your smartphones and your devices and using your smartphones and your devices to make your lives better, to make your life better, to make you a better human being. Jenny's book, How to Be Human in a Digital World, talks about how do you walk that fine line between overuse and use of your smart devices. How to Be Human in a Digital World. We'll talk to Jenny Black at the bottom of the hour. We'll get your calls next segment, 844-236-6010. If you want to purchase longevity products, go to brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com. And if you want to sign up to join the Brightside Ben team, that's even better. For a one-time fee, you can be in business for yourself. You can have a home-based business that helps change the world at the most fundamental and basic level there is, which is the level of good health and nutrition. Click on the Join the Team link at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com, or call 866-735-2470, 866-735-2470 for more information. All right. We've been talking about vaccines. We've been talking about fungal infections. We've been talking about how we medicalize ourselves in the name of good health, how we pharmacalize ourselves in the name of good health. Vaccines are kind of a poster child for that. Yesterday we talked about the idea of our of vaccinating and protecting ourselves pharmacologically for doing what our immune system is designed to do. Pharmacalizing, I think that's a word, pharmacalizing is sometimes a necessary evil, that is true, but it's never a good thing. We don't tend to think of vaccines as medicines. We don't tend to think of vaccines as drugs, but they are. They're medicines and they're drugs, but they're not given to sick people, they're given to healthy people, typically young, healthy people. Another important point about vaccines is that we don't often talk about is that there's stuff in the vaccines that have nothing to do with their intended effect of protecting us. The old-style vaccines, they would give you a living or a weakened antigen. The immune system activator is called the antigen. The old-style vaccines, they would give you a bacteria that was attenuated, or a virus perhaps that was attenuated or weakened or perhaps dead. Unfortunately, when you give a bacteria, you have to have some kind of preservation in the system. That's when you give an attenuated virus or an attenuated bacteria. They have to put a preservative in there. Aside from the fact that these active antigens, these viruses and bacteria, these immune system stimulators, are grown on animal tissue. That means that they're going to be subject to pathogenic proteins that are on the animal tissue, that normally exist in the animal tissue. Some of these pathogenic proteins are called prions, P-R-I-O-N-S. I remember a few years ago prions were in the news about as a cause of what was called mad cow disease. Perhaps you remember that. I think it was about early 2000s. Mad cow disease was freaking people out. When I was making skincare products, I used to have to claim or put a disclaimer that none of my ingredients came from cows. None of my ingredients came from animals, because everybody was concerned about their skincare products. There might be prions in their skincare products. So all these crazy ideas, crazy notions in the world of health. We weren't concerned about vaccines with prions. We were concerned with skincare products with prions. And people were concerned about meat that had prions in them too. It kind of faded out of the public consciousness about 2003, I think 2004, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, these prions live on animal tissue. These basic proteins. Prions are just really fundamental basic proteins that have a sort of intelligence to them, and they can cause serious problems. including mental brain health problems. Some people thought at one time that Alzheimer's disease was related to prions. There's a disease called Jacob-Creutzfeldt syndrome, which is a kind of dementia that's associated with prions that are ingested in the body and that go into the brain. In any case, there are these antigens that are in vaccines are grown on animal tissue, and they're subject to toxicity from prions, according to an article in the German medical journal, and I cannot pronounce this name, Medizinische Monatsschrift für Pharmaceuten. I think I'm pronouncing that okay, probably butchering it a little bit. Anyway, quote, during the production process of pharmaceuticals, the risk for contamination of infectious prions can be reduced by careful choice of animal material, the replacement of animal material, and by appropriate production procedures, unquote. In other words, they're talking about the risk of prions and prion contamination being reduced, not eliminated, being reduced. Again, quote, during the production process of pharmaceuticals, and this is typically vaccines, by the way, the risk of contamination by infectious prions can be reduced by careful choice of animal material, the replacement of animal material, and by appropriate production procedures. They're talking about reducing the risk of prion contamination, not eliminating it, just reducing it. And of course, in addition to the prion issue, the vaccines have to be preserved, typically with thimerosal, which is a form of mercury. Only God knows how anybody can think that's a good idea, to inject mercury, probably the most toxic of all the elements, right into your bloodstream. And by the way, fungus love mercury. Fungus love things that human beings can't ingest. Fungus love. So if you have a problem with fungus in your blood or fungus in your system, they're going to trap the mercury. They're going to hold onto the mercury. Then there's the whole issue of adjuvants, ADJUVANTS, which are added to the vaccines. Adjuvants, the word adjuvant means helper. What does an adjuvant help? It helps activate the immune system. An adjuvant is an extra burden on the immune system. It's an extra toxin that's added to a vaccine to ensure antigenicity. These weakened viruses and these weakened bacteria don't always stimulate the immune system, so they got a problem. If we weaken the bacteria so that it doesn't cause a bacterial infection when you get injected with the vaccine, or we kill the bacteria, or we kill the virus, then it won't cause a bacterial infection, but it might not be strong enough to activate the immune system. If we make the bacteria stronger, the virus stronger, so it activates the immune system, you may get a viral infection. You may get the bacterial infection that the vaccine is supposed to protect you against. So you got a problem here. You got to have it has to be weak enough, but not strong enough. And so what they'll do is they'll weaken it a lot, and then they'll throw in an extra poison, an extra toxin. That's called an adjuvant, to ensure that the immune system will actually be activated. Of course, now you got a problem with the adjuvant. You can see where we're going with this thing. All right, I'm Pharmacist Ben. 844-236-6010 is our number. You're listening to The Bright Side. We'll be back after this. Okay, we're back on The Bright Side. I am Pharmacist Ben. 844-236-6010 is our number. If you have questions, comments, success stories you'd like to share, we'll get your calls this segment. If we have calls, we'll talk to Jenny Black about her book, How to Be Human in a Digital World. Jenny is the founder of the Media Trauma Care Center, and her website is mediatrauma.com. We'll talk to Jenny at the bottom of the hour and get your calls this segment. All right, so vaccines are problematic. We don't think of them as problematic as a culture, although certainly there are anti-vaxxers. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I just think we should be rational and we should apply critical thinking to the notion that we're injecting toxins right into our bloodstream. I don't see how that can be a good thing, although perhaps it's a necessary evil. There's the issue of preservatives, there's the issue of contaminants, prions, and then there's the issue of adjuvants. Adjuvants are extra poisons that are added to make sure that you have an immune response. If the bacteria or the antigen, the bacteria, the virus, the antigen was strong, the patient might get the disease just by being injected with the causative organism. So the antigen, the antigenic virus or bacteria, has to be given in a weakened or non-living state. But then the immune response might not be significant enough to produce or induce protective antibodies. So the solution is, let's throw in some extra immune system stimulators. Let's throw in some helpers, i.e. adjuvants, which will ensure that the immune system will be triggered. And these extra substances are actually toxins that are injected directly into the blood. They include something called saponins, which are soapy materials. Saponins, S-A-P-O-N-I-N-S, are a type of chemical that gets turned into soap in factories. Excuse me. All plants make saponins, and saponins are highly irritating, as you would imagine. So they'll inject them right into the blood as part of the vaccine. Sometimes they'll put emulsions into the blood. An emulsion is a water and oil blend with a chemical that pulls the oil and water together, an emulsifying agent. And this emulsifying agent ensures that you get a nice uniform blending of water and oil. Water and oil don't mix. You put an emulsifying agent in there, you get water and oil. Basically, you're sticking a lotion or a cream right into your bloodstream, at least from a molecular sense. How is that a good idea? These adjuvants are especially toxic, and they're not used. Some of these adjuvants, they're always looking for good adjuvants. Some of these adjuvants are associated with autoimmune disease. I have a textbook called Adjuvants and Autoimmune Disease. Just Google Adjuvants and Autoimmune Disease. Most commonly used adjuvants are aluminum salts, particularly alum. They'll use silicone, the same silicone that's in breast implants. They'll use that as an adjuvant. The selection of the adjuvant for a particular vaccine or particular bacteria or virus or antigenic entity is very important. You got to match them up. Adjuvants have to be matched up perfectly with a specific antigen. Certain adjuvants are used with specific antigens. And adjuvants specific disease states that are being inoculated against have specific adjuvants that have to be used. You have to have, it's a science of matching the adjuvant with the antigen or matching the adjuvant with the specific disease state that has to be accounted for. And there's some thought that adjuvant's response can also vary patient to patient. And this is one of the reasons probably why you have untoward effects or even deadly effects on certain patients and not on others. Some patients respond to adjuvants differently than other patients. If you have, depending on the microbiome, for example, certain bacterial populations in the intestine will affect how an adjuvant is processed in the body. So if you have different bacterial population, and if you're suffering from a dysbiosis or you have specific species in your intestine that other people don't have, and everybody's microbiome is different, you're going to respond to adjuvants, and in fact you may respond to vaccines differently than other people. We're playing with fire here is what I'm saying. There's many researchers who believe that adjuvants are related to inappropriate immune responses and that can result in autoimmunity. For all of these reasons, vaccine researchers and manufacturers are constantly on the lookout for safer and more gentler and more appropriate adjuvants. From the November 2009 issue of the journal Lupus, quote, alongside their supportive role, adjuvants were found to inflict by themselves an illness of autoimmune nature, defined as adjuvant disease. How do you like that? You get a vaccine, and now you have an adjuvant disease. The debatable question of silicone as an adjuvant and connective tissue diseases, for connective tissue diseases, as well as the Gulf War syndrome and macrophagic myofasciitis, that's a disease of the muscle, which followed multiple injections of aluminum-based vaccines, are presented here. Owing to the adverse effects exerted by adjuvants, there is no doubt that safer adjuvants need to be developed and incorporated into future vaccines, unquote. Is anybody telling us this? Is anybody telling us this when we get vaccinated? That there's a big problem here, and they're always looking for different adjuvants, and adjuvants are associated with autoimmune diseases and weird kinds of responses like Gulf War syndrome. Nobody could figure out what that was about, but it turns out that Gulf War syndrome occurred after soldiers were vaccinated. I'm not an anti-vaxxer here. I'm just saying we got to be rational. We got to use our critical thinking skills. How is it a good idea to stick stuff into your bloodstream, not just that contains bacteria or viruses or antigens, but also that has these adjuvants in there, in addition to preservatives, in addition to contaminants from animal tissue? Just want to be critically thinking here. Do you need vaccines? Sometimes, yes. If I'm going to Africa or I'm going to the rainforest, I probably would get a malaria vaccine or a vaccine from tropical viruses. But do we need to be giving kids 30, 40, 50, 80, 70, 80? I don't even know. I think it's up to 70 or 80 vaccines now. Is anybody thinking about this? So this autoimmune issue is a really big problem, and there's a lot of literature on it, and you can just Google adjuvants and autoimmune diseases. I have a textbook that talks all about it. Textbook. Not a popular book, but a textbook that's written by whose chapters are made up of peer-reviewed journal articles. And so this link between autoimmunity and vaccination, probably associated with adjuvants, is well known, well elucidated, well articulated. It's all over the literature. Post-vaccination adverse events oftentimes mimic autoimmune reactions. They're very similar to autoimmune reactions. From the October 2017 edition of the Journal of the European Association for Predictive, Preventive, and Personalized Medicine, also known as EPMA, while vaccinations can reduce the probability of disease, they can also trigger another disease at the same time. Quote, vaccination should be considered as part of the mosaic of autoimmunity, in which the prevention of an autoimmune disease could induce another autoimmune disease. You take a vaccine to prevent some kind of autoimmune disease, you can get another autoimmune disease. The cure is causing problems. This is a fundamental conundrum that the medical model has, where a cure causes more problems, or a remedy. I don't want to say cure, or a treatment, we'll say. A treatment causes more problems. This is the fundamental problem of the medical model, where our treatments cause more problems. The medical model cannot get around this idea that how we treat disease leads to more issues. This is what happens when we decide we know more than the body. When we hijack the biochemistry of the body pharmacologically, because we're smarter than the body. This is why nutrition is so important. This is why the Mighty 90 essential nutrients are so important. Not only are diseases often caused by deficiencies in nutrients, but nutrients are the way the body or what the body inherently and naturally uses to take care of health challenges, without side effects and toxicities. All right, I'm pharmacist Ben. Jenny Bruce will be with us in our next segment. We're going to talk about how to be human in a digital world. We are back on the bright side. I'm pharmacist Ben. We're on the air Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 Pacific and 10 to 11 Central Time, and 24/7 on the archive page at benfuchsarchives.com, also brightsideben.com. You can purchase longevity products at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, and criticalhealthnews.com. We've got blog posts, news stories, videos, lots of great health information on all our websites. And don't forget to take a look at our Truth Skin Health products, all formulated in my compounding pharmacy for healing wounds. Healing wounds equals beauty. Thus our 1,500 plus 4- and 5-star reviews, which you can check out at truthreviewed.com, truthreviewed.com. We get them in every day, 4- and 5-star reviews, and I'm still amazed by some of the things people are saying, even though I've been working with our Truth formulations now for going on 25, almost 30 years now. Never any preservatives, fragrances, fillers, waxes, emulsifiers, water, silicone, vegetable oil, nothing your skin doesn't need or doesn't want. True minimalist skincare. Highly potent with high amounts of active materials and transdermal penetrance. You could find all our Truth Skin Health products at truthtreatments.com and our 1,500 plus 4- and 5-star reviews at truthreviewed.com. All right, I'm looking forward to speaking to our guest today. Jenny Black is the founder of the Media Trauma Care Center. Her website is mediatrauma.com. She's the author of a book called Inner Technology, How to Be Human in a Digital World. She specializes in training and education about mental health and how mental health is impacted by the use of media, particularly my smartphone, I bet. We'll talk to Jenny about that. Jenny Black, please welcome Jenny Black to The Bright Side. Hello, Jenny.
Hey, Ben. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Nice to talk to you.
So this is to hear your voice.
This is a timely subject, I have to say, and I have to own up to the fact that I think I'm addicted to my iPhone. But I use it for data. I use it to get information. Like I'll be reading a book, and invariably I'll want to see a topic, and I'll just go to my iPhone, and if I don't have it with me, I feel a little panicked. That's why I think I might be addicted. How do you draw the line between all the wonderful things all of our devices do for us in terms of making us smarter and making us better and making us more efficient, and then this overuse and addictive kind of quality that they can induce?
I mean, you're in very good company. If any one of us who owns a smartphone, which I think I recently heard there are more phones than humans on planet Earth.
Seriously? Oh, my gosh.
Talk about a global problem. So I love that you said, you go to it for information. And I was just, as I was looking at your website and all the amazing things that you do, I thought, even with health, you can get on there and you could just lose your life learning more and more. So I think it's really important that it's about content and process. I was reading how you're a big believer in, garbage in and garbage out, and how that's the same is true for, obviously, for what we take into our mind.
For data.
For data. So a lot of times it could be really great content. So we can all sort of go, okay, if I'm watching really terrible stuff, I know that's going to affect me. But sometimes it can be really good stuff and just too much of it to actually assimilate into your practice, your mind, your own thoughts, where you can be so full of all the information that you've taken in, you don't have a chance to access the brilliant information that exists inside of you, right?
Very, very nice. So there's data gluttony. You can have data gluttony.
Absolutely.
And so there's an element of digestion that has to take place. Is that what you're saying?
I think that is a beautiful... The metaphors for this with... the physical body are really strong. I love that digestion idea.
Yeah. So information, you can't just eat information. You have to digest it, and you also have to assimilate it. You've got to break it down and use it and make it part of you somehow. And if you have too much, I find myself, I think I'm a data glutton. I think I'm addicted to data, but I don't know where to draw the line. How do you know where to stop?
I would say the number one boundary to look at is time. Is to say, okay, I want to research and to make some choices before you get on, right? To say, I'm actually choosing to research this topic today.
Not just reflexively? Not just
how many hours do I want to research this? And set a timer. Set some sort of external cue that will be like, okay, that's my time.
So you call your center a media trauma care center. Describe trauma and what that looks like in terms of media trauma. Describe that, media trauma, and what that looks like.
So trauma happens when our challenges outpace the resources that we have to deal with it. And so in that moment, we kind of shut down. We don't engage the problem because something in our system knows I can't handle this. So, obviously, if you're a child who's in an abusive situation, that's a picture of trauma, of like that child isn't going to take on that trauma. They know they have to kind of detach, dissociate, because they don't have the resources for handling it. So what that does is that starts to make us, later on in life, dissociate from challenges. Like we lose that ability to know if we have the resources for the challenges. When we experience the challenge, our little systems are like, oh, this is bad. I need to shut this down. And that keeps us from having access to those resources and our own agency for solving and engaging problems.
Do you think that there are forces beyond our control, or forces that we don't even know about that compel us to do these things, that compel us to scroll up or to... Actually, I know there are. Have you seen this movie, Social Dilemma?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So how do you combat that? I mean, there's areas of our brain that we don't even know we have that are being activated by all of these techniques.
I believe it will become one of the most important things that any human can do to learn about humans' vulnerabilities and limitations. And our experiences of whether it be the internet or our smartphones is that we are in this limitless world, this realm with no boundaries, which is exciting, especially for those of us who've experienced life pre-internet. And, I mean, I bet you're with me. Do you remember going to the library and having to find the magazine?
Yeah, or the fish, the microfiche, or the cards, the Dewey Decimal System with the cards.
Oh, I miss
Do you remember that?
I miss Dewey, Ben.
Oh my God! I used to have a stack of books. I'd have to walk with a stack of books in the Xerox machine and all. Do you really miss those days? Because I was going to say, as bad as everything is, it seems so much more convenient.
Exactly. Well, I was going to say, I remember having to change the topic that I wanted to write my research paper on because the library didn't have the articles
oh my God.
for me to be able to reference. So I'm with you in that I love that I can find the information that I can find now. I mean, what a joy and a privilege, and it's a gift. And I am limited in the amount of information that I can eat, digest, assimilate, and that very, back to your whole conversation about nutrition, I even have to be very careful when I'm doing research on media trauma. It gets really dark, and I have to take care of myself. I have to protect myself from just a secondary trauma of a lot of this.
I wonder, we got to take a commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about this one thing that was really in our lives a lot that we seem to be addicted to, and it doesn't serve us, and it's called the news. I want to talk about the news when we come back, all right? We got Jenny Black. Her book is How to Be Human in a Digital World. We'll be back with more of Jenny Black on the bright side right after this. On the bright side, we're talking to Jenny Black. Her book, How to Be Human in a Digital World, and her website is mediatrauma.com. I love that term, media trauma, because when I think of the media, and I actually have a degree in journalism, and when I think of the media, I think of the news. Well, tell us about the link between the news and trauma, psychological trauma, and what we can do about it. How do you keep abreast of what's going on in the world and not go down this rabbit hole that leads us to not be traumatized?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, first of all, I have an incredibly deep respect for journalists. My son is also a journalist, and I am watching this new generation of journalists just tirelessly pursue truth and fairness and communicating what is real, to the public.
Awesome. I love it.
So I believe it's a very honorable industry, and it has gotten, I think when we're talking about the news, we both know what you're talking about. It is the kind of fear monster of this business plan that needs to keep your attention and can do that by having this inciting story.
It should be called the bad news, not the news. It should be called the bad news. There's never anything good, right? It's always the bad news.
Well, and I do think that's what a lot of journalists struggle with, is there's the good stories, it's hard to make it, right? People, when they see good stories, they feel good about life, they feel good about themselves, and they turn it off, and they walk away, and they want to engage their reality, and they believe the world is a good place. And that does not fit the business plan of how the media works right now. So the example I give to my clients all the time is if you're walking down the street and you get mugged and someone takes your wallet and they run with it, you have just experienced a trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Like out of nowhere. You're just minding your own business. Well, that person who takes your wallet, that the instinct we have is to go get my wallet back from them. They stole something from me, and if I could get it back from them, I would be non-traumatized again, right? I'd get what I lost back. Right. So that's what we call in therapy a trauma bond, which is that you stay connected to the source of your trauma in hopes that it will repair what it stole.
You're obsessed with getting your wallet back.
Yes. And that is what happens on a deep psychological level when we're watching things on the news or in our social media feed and we see something terrible. It's like it just stole something from me, right? It could be my innocence or my peace of mind. Wow. And so I'm going to stay there hoping and believing that it's going to give back to me what it stole.
Wow. That's like the Capitol rioters, that sounds like. Those people, they were obsessed with something stolen from them.
And they were going to get it back.
And they're going to get it back, exactly.
They're going to get it back. And, of course, a trauma bond not only keeps us stuck in the trauma cycle, we now become the participants of the trauma.
Wow.
We're now another member who has been pulled in, and the capacity, the vigilance at which any one of us can stay nonviolent and mentally healthy and whole is our world's best hope at having people who are, sharing peace and giving kindness and caring for the problems.
So what I hear you say, detach from this trauma bond, right? I think I'm hearing you say that. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's a level of detachment from the trauma bond rather than trying to obsess with getting your wallet back, somehow detach. But then how do you prevent people from stealing your wallet?
Right. So that's what trauma tells us, that if I spend all my time making sure my wallet isn't stolen, it will never be stolen again. And what that creates is a person who's not able to ever do anything else except protect their wallet.
Wow. So your need for protection ends up being counterproductive. Your desire not to have your wallet back leads to more trauma. That's really interesting, because on your website, one of the things you talk about is being present in order to recover from trauma or prevent trauma. So that's kind of says to me like being present is forget about the wallet and just be here now. Be in the moment now.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
And you know, also what I get to witness, I've of course experienced it myself, but it's always easier to see in someone else. And what I witness with my clients is so much of that pursuit of the trauma bond is really about not wanting to grieve what was lost.
Oh my goodness.
And sometimes being present means being present to all
to grief.
To the grief.
Wow. Yeah. So you think our desire to pull up the smartphone to distract ourselves is a way of avoiding the inherent grief that we all feel just from being alive? The grief of everything that goes on?
Yes, one from being alive, and then one from being alive this year. I think we've experienced a global grief that I've not experienced in my lifetime. I would say my grandparents probably have. But if you are familiar with the phases of grief, think about anger, denial, depression. Acceptance?
Acceptance. There's one more. There's a fifth one.
But if you look at those and you see the way that people are behaving and feeling right now, it is such a oh, look, they're in grief. They're just going through the anger phase of it right now. They're going through the denial phase of it. And bargaining.
Oh, bargaining. That's right. So do you think that the answer to all of this is to sit and feel grief?
I think that you have come up with a very beautiful and important thing for us to learn how to do as a culture.
Which is to feel grief.
To allow ourselves and to honor what has been lost.
Yeah.
What we have all lost.
There's just this last year we've lost some. Like I think you probably feel the same thing. It's almost like a chapter's closed and can't open it up again. Do you feel that? Does that make sense to you? Like this last year, like we'll never go back to 2019 ever again. The way we lived, right? No. And never again. It's gone.
No,
it's dead.
And Ben, the last time I felt this way was September 11th. That same feeling of that life will be marked before and after this time in history.
So you think we're as a culture anyway, we're not in acceptance of that this is dead, that something is completely gone, a way of life is completely...
Exactly. I think what we're all seeing right now is most of us are in denial, anger, or bargaining, and depression.
Wow.
Depression.
And so the answer is to sit with it and to be with it like you would be with somebody who's dying, to mourn actually. You say to mourn. We need to mourn. As a culture. Wow, that's a lot of tears there. You know, I've experienced grief and I've experienced mourning, and on the one hand, it really sucks. It totally sucks.
Right.
But on the other hand, when you get through it, you're free.
Well, and your body, right? I'm sure you have studied this. Your body, our bodies need to let it go. Our bodies are storing all of that grief.
That's correct.
So
correct.
That also is a lot of the aggression and trauma we're seeing, is that we're not giving our bodies room to let it out.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure you've heard this. Massage therapists will tell you people cry on the massage table.
Oh, I've done it.
Okay. So you know what I'm talking about, right? Because we store it physiologically in the connective tissue. Literally in the connective tissue, we store it physically. There's a guy named Wilhelm Reich. Are you familiar with him? He talked about holding it on, little micro contractions in the body, hold on, and they result in little spots of death, literally necrosis, where you don't have oxygen and you don't have nutrition, and little pieces of death throughout our bodies, and ultimately that's what kills us. Have you heard of orgone energy? You know what that is?
No.
Orgone energy is the fundamental energy of life that is trapped in these micro contractions that occur every time we don't deal with our grief. And it starts as we're a baby. And when we release these micro contractions, all this energy flows out, and it feels really, really good. He called it Orgone energy. There's a really cool book called Me and Orgone by Orson Bean. I bet you don't remember him. You're too young to remember Orson Bean. He was an actor, and he wrote a book called Me and Orgone. He talked about how when he released all these micro contractions, all this Orgone energy flowed through his body, how wonderful he felt. And I think that's what we can experience. I think that's what you're saying. That's what we all can experience if we let go of this, or we detach it, or deal with it. Not just ignore it, right?
Correct.
Like somehow deal with it or process
Correct.
it. Process. Maybe assimilate it, like we're digesting, like we talked about digesting and metabolizing and assimilating. Maybe we have to do that with grief too, no?
I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for everything you're doing. This is really, really important work. You do consultations, correct?
I do.
Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
So just contact us through mediatrauma.com, and we do workshops and trainings for therapists, businesses. Basically, how can we start to create a culture where our expectations of the way we use media are respecting our human resources?
Thank you so much, Jenny Black. The book is Intertechnology, How to Be Human in a Digital World. Website, mediatrauma.com. Thanks for what you're doing, Jenny. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Ben. Take care.
All right. That was Jenny Black. Website, mediatrauma.com. Her book, which is available on Kindle, is Intertechnology, How to Be Human in a Digital World. And that's all the time we have for today on The Bright Side. Thanks for listening, friends. I am Pharmacist Ben. Have a wonderful, beautiful, awesome, spectacular day. We'll talk to you later, folks. Bye for now.